Get ready to take a flamethrower to the official narrative and learn what the elites don't want you to know. You're listening to The Tom Woods Show.
Hey everybody, Tom Woods here, episode 2541 with Clint Russell of Liberty Lockdown. It has been very, very satisfying, and I've been very happy to see the gradual, sometimes astonishing growth of the influence of Clint Russell, especially because of that thing you told me when we met those years ago, I was going to hear about you, and I thought, yeah, that's what they all say. But boy, did you deliver, man.
Yeah, well, you got to have bravado if you're going to make it in this world, right?
You sure do.
Well, this is episode 2541, I think you said, and I think this is my third time on here. It is an honor and a privilege, and goodness gracious, is there a lot to talk about, so this will be a fun one.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I don't even know where to start. Now, this is a little bit old news, but I'm still curious about it. Mark Zuckerberg wrote a letter to the, was it the Judiciary Committee or something, or a subcommittee of that, basically saying that the demands made of Facebook during COVID, but not exclusively confined to COVID, he talked about the Hunter Biden laptop also, were not reasonable, they shouldn't have been done, and he shouldn't have given in to them, and that if he's asked to do that again, it's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people have talked about this because, I mean, I understand why some people would say, I don't believe a word this guy says. He's a lizard person. You can't trust him. He's just trying to maneuver just in case the other party wins and this, that, and the other thing. And other people say, I think he may actually have had a genuine change of heart. Where do you come down on that?
Well, I tend to actually believe that he does feel bad about it because his emails years ago actually identified this. He said in an email to some of his employees that basically this is what happens when we allow the government to coerce our actions, and oftentimes we're going to regret it. He said that not like in the past few months since Trump has been polling to maybe be the next president. He felt that way years ago. So I think that at its core, he probably does feel some remorse about it. But it also, I would be extraordinarily naive to believe that he is not, given that he has immense data that he's able to access and he's able to see kind of read the tea leaves of his data dive from his own products, Instagram, Facebook. He knows there's a tremendous amount of animosity towards not just Mark Zuckerberg, but also any platform that censored us during that period. And they know that there will be a public basically approval if Donald Trump is to win and if he is to persecute him to the end of the earth as a consequence of the Zuckerbucks phenomenon or the censorship phenomenon. So I think that it's self-serving, but there's also, at its core, I think he does realize that he made a mistake. But I think that the bigger issue is that this is what all large social media platforms have to do if they want to basically coexist with the largest government in human history. They are put in this position regardless of what their principles are or the strength of their character. If you want to be one of the largest companies on earth, you basically have to acquiesce to the governments. Look at what's happening with Elon Musk in Brazil right now, or Pavel Durov in France getting arrested after he had already fled Russia because Vladimir Putin wanted to arrest him, and then he goes to the UAE and then he takes some hottie to a date with the president of France and he gets locked up. This is a very dangerous paradigm, and this is not strictly an American phenomenon, though I personally believe it's being led by the U.S. State Department.
Your tweet, well, you have a tweet that sums up exactly what I was trying to say, but I couldn't quite word it right, and so I just gave up with it. But we hear a lot of talk about the importance of American leadership in the world and being the leader of the free world. And yet here we are with the U.S. regime absolutely silent about all the things you just described, absolutely silent. Instead of saying, as the leader of the free world and as a shining example of a free society, cough, cough, we must register our protest against these outrages against free speech going on first of all places in the UK, where our own tradition of liberty was born. where everyone over there who's involved in that ought to be ashamed of themselves, and then on with the other stuff. And I'm not usually, I don't usually go for the U.S. lecturing other countries, but this is a trend around the world that is not going to stop in those other countries. And the regime here is silent about it because they obviously, as you say, are possibly in on it, or at the very least, they have no problem with it. So
Right.
yeah, you're darn right. I would like to hear a few words from somebody in government somewhere saying this is a bad thing.
Exactly. I mean, is there any injustice on earth that the federal government doesn't feel compelled to speak out on if they see fit to? But when it actually comes to an issue that ought to be important to the American people, which is, can we speak freely on the internet or not? Like, this is a global issue because there are global ramifications because these platforms are global in nature. So I'm not calling for U.S. boots on the ground in France to free Pavel Durov. I'm just saying, could you speak about it? could you say how egregious this is? And it's like, yeah, I mean, we've got Senator Mike Lee and we've got Thomas Massie and just a handful of people that seem to have any concern about this, and the rest, they're biting their tongues, or they're too cowardly to speak out, or they're not paying attention, or they simply don't care. I mean, whatever the answer is, it's not good. And by the way, I mean, the Enlightenment, it's like France too, like French, the UK, like this is where kind of the classical liberalism, free speech, free press ideology comes from. It's where it arose. And now it's kind of the apex of the suppression. That's just it's not what we should be seeing. It's not what I would have expected to see. And it's an outrage. And I'm pissed that they're not pissed, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's incredibly creepy that they think this is just normal. And they're allowing speech that is dangerous or this and that. So, all right. So the principle then is you can speak all you want about frivolous trivialities, but as soon as you say something controversial, we'll decide whether it's dangerous or not. We will have a monopoly on deciding whether it's dangerous or not. And then on the basis of our own determination, we'll decide whether you belong in prison. That sounds like a good, not subject to abuse at all, that principle.
Yeah, well, I've become decent friends with Mike Benz over the years, and I'm, or actually over just the past 6 months, really, since he started doing the show I do with Luke. And he worked in kind of like, I don't know, the tech security internet sector under the Trump administration. So he really knows how this stuff works. And he's convinced that the U.S. State Department is not just, tacitly allowing this, but rather supporting this because Elon Musk and platforms that allow for free speech are, in their view, a, scare quotes, threat to democracy. Like, they genuinely believe that if we are allowed to speak freely, that populist right-wing movements will take hold all over the world, and therefore suppression of speech in order to protect democracy is now righteous and indeed good. So I think that's what they're doing. It's hard for me to believe that I believe that, but I'm very confident that's what we're witnessing at this point. Like they want, in particular, because Telegram allowed for real on-the-ground reporting about the issues in Gaza as well as the issues in Ukraine. When they were lying to us saying that Ukraine was winning the war against Russia. Well, the Telegram, chains of information allowed us to see what an unbelievable lie that was. So I think that it has put a real, wrench in their propaganda wheels, and therefore they're not going to allow for it anymore.
I also want to, your Twitter feed is like an episode. It's an episode in itself. It's like I don't even have to do it in my homework, right?
Well, thank you.
I mean, I have some things written down that I wanted to talk to you about, but then just before we went on, I was saying, let me catch up with old Clint, see what kind of bee is in his bonnet these days.
Yeah. Well, I have to stay on top of it because I do 3 nightly shows with Luke, so it's like if I'm going to stay on top of it, I might as well post about it too. But I'm glad it's a good cheat sheet.
Oh, geez, Clint. I mean, I didn't realize you were doing 3 shows with. Do you still do the Sunday afternoon one?
I mean, sometimes it's three random nightly shows with Luke and I. But,
okay.
Beyond that, we don't know what day we're going to do it. It's kind of we're flexible around the guests, but it's usually Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. This past Sunday we did an episode, so yeah, it's flexible.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. That sounds like too much work to me. I mean,
It is. It is.
I'm not afraid of work. It's just I don't want it all to be podcasting. I like to do other things, but
Yes,
I'm glad you're
exactly.
doing it. Honest to goodness, I really, really am. And you know, there are a lot worse people you could be partnered with than Luke, right? I mean, he's
For sure.
entertaining and he's got a lot of experience, so he's a great guy.
Yeah, I've learned a ton from him.
This is Luke Rudowski, by the way, we're talking about, whom I have. Maybe you can shame him. I've tried to get him on this show, and he's telling me he's busy. Well, look, I know.
Yes.
I legit know that.
Yeah, well, that's his. He does not do any. I haven't even had him on Liberty Lockdown, for God's sakes. Like
Wow. Okay.
But I haven't even asked, to be honest, because we see each other too much already. I'm like, we're done. We don't need to talk anymore. We do 6 hours a week together. That is plenty.
That I get. All right. So I want to move on to one other thing, but I will say that, you know, of course, you guys are, if you're not doing an episode, you guys are invited to my Christmas party. I have a Christmas party for supporters, and I consider you to be a supporter in spirit. So it's December 7th.
I appreciate it.
So you can do your Pearl Harbor observance and your Christmas party on the same day.
Well, what's this I hear that you're also doing another cruise?
I am doing another cruise.
When's that happening?
That is late February into March of 2025. It's TomWoodsCruise.com. Clint I did not put him up to that.
No,
it is going to be great.
Yeah, no, I'm just excited about it. If you need any guest speakers, holler at me. I'd love to join.
Oh, all right. Well, I will keep you in mind. I mean, I think I'm pretty covered for this one, but I'll keep you in mind because, for example, I've got, and this is something I think people will find interesting if they don't know already. I've had Clifton Duncan on the show several times. You know who he is?
I do, yeah. He's great.
So he's this Broadway actor, really successful. I saw him on Broadway twice, years before I knew I was ever going to know him personally. And then they demanded the shot, and he declined it, said, don't need it, don't want it. Young and healthy, not doing it. And that just ruined him. I mean, that absolutely, he lost his representation. He was just blacklisted. So he's gone the opposite way of actors who normally wait tables, then get their big break. He got his big break, and now he's back to waiting tables. I mean, it is an absolute outrage. But he's picked himself up, and he's putting together a one-man show on the life and ideas of Thomas Sowell. So that's going to be fantastic, and he raised a ton of money because everybody understands the injustice that he endured. But the thing in particular that I want to do is, another thing you don't realize about him, when I saw him on Broadway, he was just in a regular play. It was not a musical. Well, it turns out he has one of these big, booming Broadway singing voices. So he's going to sing for our people, and it's going to be, I mean, I was crossing my fingers that he would say yes. I said, you've got to come on this cruise. And he was excited. I thought, oh, okay, that's good.
Well, the true test is, will he be excited once he gets off that ship? We'll see.
Yes, absolutely right. But they really are. These are the cream of the crop of the Tom Woods audience, right? We
All
really
right,
are.
perfect.
But Mexico is bringing its best in this case. So,
well, if you ever do it out into the Bahamas, that's local for me. So,
well, I'm looking forward to doing that. I mean, it'd be nice to do. I have to see how this one goes first.
Of course,
I can't promise, because if this one's a big, I mean, the numbers so far look pretty good. But I got to do it first, and then I'll see if I'm doing another one. I'd love to have you.
Yeah.
So let's get back to you know, when Richard Nixon lost to Kennedy in 1960, Eisenhower urged him to challenge the result. And he didn't, because he said, why? He said, because that would be disunifying, you know, like, well, we got to move on and, you know, and forget all that. And it's so interesting that side of things is always so eager to just move on and let bygones be bygones. But the other side really isn't. And so you were just saying, pointing out in particular that Trump, for that very reason, said he didn't go for prosecuting Hillary because he wanted to unite the country. And your words are these: my hope is that after facing 700 years in prison and a bullet, he now realizes that the only way out is through. Prosecute every corrupt deep state actor. I agree with you. I just wish the American people had the stomach for that.
Yeah, well, I wish Donald Trump had the stomach for it.
Yeah, you're right.
You know, that's my real concern, is that, you know, as courageous as his response was to narrowly dodging death with the fight, fist pump and all that, you know, his rhetoric since then has been rather tepid compared to who he was in 2015, 16. Now, there's a real reason to wonder, maybe he's playing coy because he realizes his life is on the line, but he's going to get in there and he's going to, drain the swamp, go actually prosecute the corrupt actors that have really destroyed this country. But I'm not tremendously confident. All that being said, though, I think that's what we need. I think actually the last time I was on with you, we talked a little bit about this. Like what we're up against is as Dave Smith elucidates constantly, the largest state in human history. But I think it's now approaching one of the most corrupt. I mean, you can't really succeed at the highest levels of corporate America unless you go along with DEI or ESG frameworks, which is all part of kind of this global government framework through the United Nations and the World Economic Forum, for that matter. You can't really speak freely without getting deplatformed. We now have hard evidence that the CIA, the FBI, the DHS, the whole litany of three-letter agencies essentially dictate terms of service when it comes to big tech. Like, we're not free, but we pretend that we're the land of the free. And we need courageous actors. This is why I was such a big booster for Vivek Ramaswamy. Whether he's the real deal or not is still TBD. But in terms of rhetoric, at least he's delivering what Trump isn't. Vivek is talking 75% headcount counts across all federal departments. That would change the world. I mean, that would actually unshackle not just the American people, but the American economy. And it would be such a breath of fresh air. So I don't know, man. I'm hopeful that Trump recognizes what time it is, that playing nice with the most dangerous people that have ever walked the earth is probably not going to get you to the promised land. But I'm not sure.
Hey, folks, when I was a kid, I probably shouldn't tell this story. We had a neighbor, nice guy, right? Absolutely nice guy, no problem with him, except he couldn't tell you anything in under 30 minutes. He needs a cup of flour, 30 minutes, because it would be shot through with, you know what I mean, about things, of course we know what he means, or irrelevant tangents or whatever. It would be 30 minutes invested every single time. And I wonder if that's where my impatience for fluff had its origin, because sometimes you need to get your fluff out of books too. Just tell me what you need to tell me. And that's what the Blinkist app does for thousands of nonfiction books in 27 different categories. No fluff, just the heart of the matter. You can absorb the Blinkist summary in just 15 minutes of reading or listening. What a time to be alive. And among the thousands and thousands of titles at Blinkist, you'll even find libertarian classics by Murray Rothbard, Milton Friedman, dare I say one even by Woods, your very own host here. Well, right now, Blinkist has a special offer just for our audience. Go to Blinkist.com/Woods to start your 7-day free trial and get 40% off a Blinkist premium membership. That's Blinkist, spelled Blinkist. Blinkist.com/Woods to get 40% off and a 7-day free trial. Blinkist.com/Woods. And now for a limited time, you can even use Blinkist Connect to share your premium account. You'll get 2 premium subscriptions for the price of 1. There have been recent developments, of course, with RFK and Tulsi throwing their, RFK somewhat ambiguously, but still more or less throwing his support to Trump. And one of the valuable things about that is that Trump had to stand there and listen as both of them said that Trump is the guy who's not going to lead us into war. Because that is not the message he's getting necessarily from the people who are around him on a regular basis.
For sure.
And so now he's heard that these major endorsements are coming because he is perceived as being a peacemaker. Because when you see his criticisms of the Biden and Harris foreign policy, it's generally that it's not bellicose enough.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's good. I think it's also good that he's surrounded by them, particularly RFK Jr., because he wrote the book on Anthony Fauci. And Trump has refused to acknowledge his policy failures in 2020 when it came to keeping Fauci on board and not firing him, and a whole litany of other things. I won't detail all of it, but RFK Jr. is probably the most well-known critic of that era at this point. The present company aside. So he's. I think it's really important that Trump feels as if that's the lane he has to be in, and that he has to deliver on those promises. I mean, all of the dangers that we've talked about in terms of our diminished freedoms in America over the first 20 minutes of this episode, really pales in comparison to the existential risk that we're in because of all the proxy wars that we're participating in. So we need a peacemaker. I mean, we need someone that will go after the deep state, but just as much, we need someone who will get us out of these wars. He did an okay job in his first term, probably the best of any president in my lifetime, as low a bar as that is. And we need him to do even better this go around.
Did you watch the RFK speech in which he threw his support to Trump? Not the rally speech, but his speech to that small group of the press and stuff?
I did. Yeah, it was great.
Okay. Yeah. Because we sat down and just watched it all the way through. And, and I'm undeceived about RFK. I am well aware. I have written about many times things that he believes that make me crazy. So I don't need to be lectured about that. I already know that.
Sure.
But it just drives me crazy. I have to insert caveats like that all the time. But the amount of time he spent in that speech on chronic disease, I mean, it must have been 2/3 of the speech easy, was just on that. And I thought that was very interesting. Obviously, it's a priority of his. And the thing is, I don't know anything about that. I mean, I hear people complaining about seed oils as much as anybody else does, and about ultra-processed food and all this and that. And I don't have the knowledge base to know whether that's a load of bunk or whether there's something to it. I don't. Maybe there is. I don't know. I'm willing to listen. But those numbers he was giving, like, for example, saying that the average pediatrician in his day would go his entire career and maybe see one child who was diabetic. Now it's 1 in 3 children who come through his practice will be pre-diabetic or diabetic. Now, there's some explanation for that. There has to be. And you can go on and on. You can list, I mean, autism is just absolute. No one seems curious about what might be causing that. No curiosity at all. It's just a fact of nature. And he lists them over and over, like we have this, we have this, we have this. There has to be an explanation.
Of course.
For this.
And I think
there's no curiosity about it.
No, and I think if that's not indicative of how sick of a civilization we are in its own right, I don't know what else is. I mean, just the fact that we're not even inquiring into these obvious issues, like the most important thing, our health. I mean, aside from maybe spirituality, like that's a really important thing, right? I think we can all agree that if you're not healthy, your life is pretty much derailed. And yet we're talking about the health of our children, for God's sakes, like the most important thing. And yet no one cares. No one talks about it. It's just like, do you have another pill that I can take or that I can give my child to alleviate XYZ that probably came from the current pill regimen that they're on? I'm very appreciative of RFK Jr. for bringing this to the fore. I'm actually stunned that it took a presidential campaign for people, like, by and large, to start talking about it. But it's super important. And I think that there's obvious answers here. And a lot of it has to do with the same sort of oligarchy that exists within big tech. I think it exists within pharma. It exists within ag. We've really destroyed our food supply. Like we are from a multitude of levels. Like this is not a singular issue. I don't think you're going to be like, oh, it's this pesticide that did all of these things to us. Like, no, it's everything. I mean, we have basically just destroyed so many aspects of the inputs that are necessary for a healthy, functioning human being. And then once you realize that like gut health is also what transfers up to mental health, then you start to recognize like, oh, that's also why we're going crazy, because we're not healthy physically. So like we're not healthy mentally too. I think this is a really big issue. And, as a libertarian, I begrudge giving any credit to some sort of politician who's going to talk about alleviating this, because I'm like, we shouldn't need the government to alleviate this. It's almost certainly a byproduct of government interference in the market in the first place. But I'm grateful that he brought it to the fore.
I saw a small snippet of an interview he recently did with John Stossel. And I kind of knew Stossel would push back a bit on this because it's, Stossel's a good guy. And he was very much alone when he was on 2020 on ABC in the 80s. And there was just nobody like John Stossel. So I take nothing away from that guy. But there is a side of him that doesn't want to go to, he's also criticized the Southern Poverty Law Center. The man has done enough. But he was a little skeptical and he was saying, well, there are explanations. Americans have gotten fat. And I thought,
Yeah.
but see, that requires explanation, right?
Exactly.
How is that the end of the discussion? Why did they get fat?
Right. Well, it's kind of like the inflation argument. Like, did all these corporations just get greedy over the past couple of years? Like, did we all just begin eating, insane amounts just because we all decided to? Like, sure, there's some of that. I mean, there's self-discipline and lack of, autonomy that, like, yeah, you can definitely get off the beaten path there. But I think it's obviously true. Like, people will talk about when they travel to Europe and they eat the same amount of food that they would in America, and they lose weight, and they're like, what the hell's happening? Like, why is this the case? And I think that at its core, like, our food supply is really toxic, and I don't know that that's something that, I mean, certainly if you have enough money, given what it costs to go to a grocery store, like, it's very challenging to buy groceries, period, in this era. It seems like my grocery bill has doubled or tripled over the past few years. But if you're wealthy enough, you can certainly find organic foods and you can kind of opt out of the toxic processed food system. But for a lot of the poor people, like, that ain't an option. Like, they're going to get the cheapest thing that's on offer, and that's going to be junk. And they're going to feed their kids that. And their kids are going to be overweight because of it. And then they're going to be on the medical health, treadmill from a very early age. And it's like, once you start on that process, I think you're kind of doomed. So I don't know. I kind of a random rant on that one, but I just think it's really important when you talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wrote in my email newsletter that it's so interesting to watch the Democrats miss the point of every single issue that comes up. So they were bragging that Tim Walz oversaw the introduction of free school lunch in Minnesota. Now, the school lunches, everybody knows, are inedible slop. They're poison. Everybody knows that. You just take a look at them. It's sugary. It's just ridiculous. And so the Democrats' response to that is, but it's free.
Exactly.
We made it free. It's free slop.
Yeah, well, we printed so much money so that your parents can't afford to buy groceries or any healthy food for the children, but then we printed more money so that we could buy junk to put it in the public schools to indoctrinate and poison your children. Do you feel better?
Yeah. Yeah.
They break your leg and they hand you the crutch, right?
Yeah. Or we have this totally out of control military-industrial complex. So their response, trans equality in the military. I guess I don't know what that seems like. It misses the point here.
Yeah, I'd say so.
The concentration camp guards need to have enough minorities, and I mean, what is the matter with you people?
They've lost the plot, but
this
is all the more reason, even not from a principled aspect of, like, non-intervention, anti-war perspective, but just from a like, can we win aspect. The answer is probably no. Like, we need to avoid these wars because our military is a joke at this point. So that's my hope, is that even the more hawkish amongst us, the Republican voters that have been pro-intervention historically, will look around them and just go like, yeah, we shouldn't be fighting these wars, man.
Folks, sometimes we look around at the madness in the United States and we call it clown world, but frankly, it's more like demon world. So if you're not therefore at least thinking about a plan B, well, what exactly would have to happen before you would? I am so proud to be speaking at the Expat Money Summit, the world's largest offshore event taking place entirely online, October 7th to 11th, put on by our old friend Mikkel Thorup, repeat Tom Woods Show guest, host of the Expat Money Show, and a highly sought-after expat consultant with over 2 decades of experience. My eldest daughter, Regina, was contemplating working overseas, and Mikkel gave us an hour of his time, during which time I discovered that this guy knows everything about everything. Well, at the Expat Money Summit, discover why international diversification is a must for those looking to preserve their liberty and wealth. There's never been a more urgent time to develop a plan B, and here's where you can learn everything you need to know about crafting your perfect plan B, how to quickly acquire a second passport, diversify your finances offshore, invest in international real estate, and get in-depth insights on geopolitics from world-renowned experts. Headline speakers include Dr. Ron Paul, Doug Casey, Scott Horton, Ol Woods here, Mark Faber, and many others. To reserve your complimentary ticket, head over to expatmoneysummit.com. That's expatmoneysummit.com. I am sure you and Luke have been talking about Elon Musk and Brazil and all that.
Oh yeah, I'm deep in it.
Okay, all right. Give people. Well, you know what? I'm afraid though, because we are actually doing this a little bit in advance. That is one that could change. That's something that could change by the time this airs.
Well, just a Cliff's notes on it. Alexandre de Moraes. I'm pronouncing it with the Portuguese accent for Brazilians, but he is the Supreme Court justice under Lula, who basically has become the president or dictator of Brazil. At least that's my read of things. And he is saying that he wanted 7 accounts on Twitter banned, and he directed Elon Musk to do so, or his apparatchiks within Brazil. And Elon rejected it because they were politicians in Brazil. Maybe not all of them, but a bunch of them were. And they were his political enemies. They were people that were opposing de Moraes and his takeover of the entire political apparatus in Brazil. And he's just like, I don't want these people to be able to talk. And Elon Musk and his people, his attorneys, they looked at the documents, the foundational documents of Brazil, their constitution or whatever you call it, and they realized that what he was requesting was illegal. So they said, no, we're not going to do it. We try and honor the law. Like, Elon's very open about the fact that he's not interested in defending all free speech in all nations all over the world. He's just interested in following the laws of those nations, right? But what he realized is this guy is violating his own laws, so they can't go along with it. And that's what he did. And now de Moraes has banned X and VPNs in Brazil. So people, it's like an $8,000 or 8,000, whatever their currency is, fine daily if you use a VPN, which is many magnitudes the average income of a Brazilian. So it's basically, confiscatory. It's really egregious. But he's doing everything in his power to keep people from being able to speak freely, and X allows that. So that's the current condition of things. It will evolve over the next few days, though, for sure.
Well, I saw that they started an account in which they're going to start releasing information about what exactly was demanded of them by this judge, or what are they planning to do?
Yeah, no, that's already begun. That's actually where I got the information about there being only 7 accounts. Apparently, it was what de Moraes was asking be banned, and Elon rejected it because they were political opponents. They were actually they were politicians. It's like if Joe Biden or Kamala Harris were to dictate to Elon Musk that they have to ban Thomas Massey because he continues to speak out against them. And it'd be like, well, that's pretty egregious, right? We can all agree that that's reprehensible. But Mark Ruffalo, the Hulk, thinks it's great. Thinks that in fact Elon Musk is indicative of fascism. No, not the politician using a corporation to suppress the speech of political opposition. They're not the fascists. No, Elon Musk is the fascist. These people are so crazy, it's unbelievable.
And now, RFK's plan was, I'll stay on the ballot in the states where everybody knows what the outcome's going to be. But in 10 battleground states, I'll take my name off the ballot. And I don't know now if this is every single state or it's just a couple that I've read about where they won't let him off the ballot. So that it was a pain in the neck to get on the ballot. They will not let him off.
They required him to get 1 million signatures all across the country to get on all 50 state ballots. 1 million signatures.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
That is impossible. I mean, that really is impossible.
They did it, though, because they had so many volunteers that were anxious to get him on the ballot. But you're right. Now he wants off the ballot in these 10 swing states because he doesn't want to swing the election to the Democrats. And some of those states, I don't know how many. I know that there's at least 2 that are saying it's too late. Now, we did everything in our power. We sued you into oblivion. We required you to get 1 million signatures. Too late. Now you have to stay on. We did everything to keep you off. Now you have to stay on. I mean, whatever, they have no principles but power.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that's exactly it. And the Hunter Biden laptop thing. I mean, as soon as 50 plus intelligence people said it was Russian disinformation, that was when you knew for sure it was real. I mean, who at this point thinks that the consensus of the intelligence agencies is going to give you the truth about anything? I mean, over and over and over and over again. And so There was just a poll that came out. Now, the data is a few years old, but I doubt it's changed very much. And it was showing the trend, Democrats, Republicans, Independents. Now, okay, that's not the greatest breakdown, but that's what the poll was about. And where they stand on the subject of whether the media is trustworthy. And so you look back, I don't know, what is it, 25 years, something like that. And it was like 60-40, Democrats 60, Republicans 40. It's now Democrats 73, Republicans 10. So at that point, you're just living in two different universes. You can't even have a conversation with people who 73% of whom think the media is trustworthy, because it means that there is a whole slate of demonstrably false things that they are absolutely convinced are true.
Well, this is why it's becoming increasingly challenging for me to have Democrat friends, because what are we going to talk about? We just don't see the world the same way, because I don't trust the media, but I don't trust them because they've lied to me year after year, time after time, topic after topic. But get this. This is just an amazing tie-in to the way you brought up the 51 former and current intel agents that said that Hunter Biden laptop had all the hallmarks of Russian disinformation. Well, guess who one of those guys was? The husband of Dana Bash, the person who was put on by CNN to do the first and only, to this junction, sit-down interview with Kamala Harris and Tim Walz just last week. Her husband was one of those 51 fraud liars. I mean, and now she gets the nod to be basically the tool by which they try and lie about Kamala Harris's capacity to speak. That was a 45-minute interview that was truncated down to 17 minutes because she's that bad. Like, she can't do any sort of conversation without sounding absolutely horrible. But yeah, it was her husband, which is one of those 51 intel agents. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the dots connect themselves.
It's so incestual. It's crazy. But if you point it out, though, then you're some crazy right winger. It's ridiculous.
You see this thing? It was Ben Stiller, the actor, and he might have been arriving at the Democratic convention. I don't know where he was arriving, but he was stopped. So, hey, why are you endorsing Kamala Harris? And he goes into this thing about it's just such an exciting movement, and I think it's time for some change, and I think it's happening. So there was, of course, no substance. What substance would there be?
Right.
And it was, we need some change. So he's going to vote for the sitting vice president for change. And he's going to vote for the party that's been in power 12 out of the past 16 years. And nobody calls him on that. Like, you sure that makes sense?
Right.
What are you even talking about?
And in my opinion, Donald Trump was never actually the president. Like, he didn't get to actually do much of what he wanted to. So really, it's kind of like a uniparty rule, even when the Republicans win.
That's a good point.
Like, what changed? We didn't start any new wars. Like, okay, I guess that's a win. But yeah, Ben Stiller doesn't have anything to say because there's nothing to say. I mean, other than the fact that she's a black woman, like that's it. That's the only change that you're talking about. Because aside from that, she doesn't really represent any difference of opinion from Joe Biden. In fact, they don't have any opinions. Like, these people are just direct conduits for the money interests all over the world. And like, that's what they're going to do. So it's just pure identitarian garbage. Like, the fact that people that I appreciate their work, like Ben Stiller, like, I think he's done a lot of great work, but just to be so vapid, so empty, it's just so incapable of thinking for yourself and seeing past the identitarian trap. It's heartbreaking, honestly. And it's not just him. We're bringing him up to pick, one person to tear down, but it's like, this is pervasive. This is like almost everybody in Hollywood, almost everybody on the coast, like California, New York, like most people perceive the world this way, where white people are the problem and we have to, and then men are the problem and straight people are the problem. So we need gay, minority women. It's crazy.
Now, I don't, especially after COVID, I don't have a whole lot of confidence in, let's say, the general public. That doesn't mean that there aren't a lot of good, decent, sensible people out there, but I don't see where that confidence would come from. But at the same time, I see that there's a desire to shut a lot of people up. Even people who are saying things that are probably not the majority opinion. but they still want to shut them up.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if we were, and of course the media just misleading you on everything, absolutely everything. Even, you had that sinister picture of Elon that they put up. They did that to Ron Paul. He'd always be looking crazy. Like we haven't all taken a photo at an inopportune split second that makes you look crazy. But that was the one they found apparently. So they used that. If this weren't the case, if we were genuinely on a level playing field, not all problems would be solved for the reason I mentioned. But I don't know. Do you feel like maybe things would be different if we could just talk without these people getting in the way?
Oh yeah, I mean the reason that Pavel Durov got arrested is because it was undermining their propaganda when it came to the wars. The reason X is being banned is because it undermines or it assists in this kind of populist right-wing movement that's arising not just in Brazil but in much of the world. I mean, Europe is rife with it. I think Donald Trump is indicative of it. So yeah, I think that our ability to speak free, like they wouldn't be censoring us if they didn't need to. Like they need to. And the problem is that it's largely effective. Like what I've noticed is that it's not that they're able to stop information from reaching the people. It's that they're able to stop the information from reaching all of the people. Like we're essentially cordoned off into our own little informational spheres. And because they've kookified like anything that's on BitChute or Rumble or any of the more free speech oriented platforms, like the people that are over there watching that stuff, they're with it. Like they know what's going on. Like they know what we're up against. They understand the problems that we face. But then if you go talk to an average CNN viewer or even a Fox News viewer these days, since they can Tucker, they're kind of in the dark. I mean, the Fox News viewer obviously is more with it than the CNN viewer, but they're also still, led astray on many topics because they're not seeking out truly alternative information. But yeah, just broadly speaking, I think that like there's tens of millions of Americans that know and talk about on a daily basis everything that you and I do. And then there's, unfortunately, 70 million that think that everything that's reported by the New York Times is the gospel and CNN is real news. And, I don't think we'll ever reach those people. So that's the divide in this country for sure, is where you get your information.
Clint, what would be a good link for people to follow to get more Clint Russell?
At Liberty Lockpod on X. If people want to support my work over there and subscribe, that's great. That's probably the best way to support me. I'll follow you back. Liberty Lockdown is the show, YouTube. It's everywhere. Just search Liberty Lockdown. And then I also do that three times a night show with Luke Radowski and Steph over on wearechange.org. And it's all one word, We Are Change on Rumble. We have an exclusive deal over there. So we do 3 live shows per week and it's been a blast. They do not censor us. An hour 2, we are cuffs off, muzzles off. We get to actually tell it how it is. It is a blessing to have a platform where you get to have tens of thousands of people that watch as you actually speak your mind. Living in the gulag, the technological gulag of YouTube and having to bite my tongue all the time. Like even me, it wears you down. So to have those 3 hours per week where I get to speak freely has been great.
Yeah, I could only imagine. I mean, I have the old Tom Woods show. But, there have been times when I've had to struggle with, a certain platform whose name won't be mentioned. I mean, it is just out of this world crazy. But I'm on all of them. However you want to consume your Tom Woods, I'm on all of them. But check out Clint Russell. He's very much worth listening to, as I think this episode alone made clear. So, Clint, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Anytime, Tom. Have a good one.
And don't forget TomWoodsCruise.com for the rest of you. See you next time.
Make yourself and those you love less vulnerable to the regime, both mentally and physically. Get more forbidden information at tomsfreebooks.com and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. See you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.